Carolina Storyteller tells stories that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Stay spooky, my friends. Hi, folks, and welcome to the 50th episode of The Carolina Storyteller. I am Jonathan Phoenix, your storyteller for the evening. I am so glad you guys are here to join me on this monumental episode of the show. We're here at 50 episodes. It's been a pretty fun ride. We've had lots of fun getting here, and we've got a great show for you this evening. We've got a couple of different stories. We're going to have some voices from the past coming on to say a few things. And then to wrap up and end off the show, we're going to be going to our big Patreon giveaway. We're going to be rolling the dice, and we're going to see who it is that is going to get that package that includes the Carolina Storyteller hat, a copy of Redcoats, a copy of Through the Flames, which will, after September, I think, will be known as Through the Flames, the Arsonist, with the sequel, Through the Flames, the Academy, coming out sometime next year. I'm not sure. Still looking at how that's going to work out. We're going to have a big announcement about a project that's coming up, and we'll be talking about the people that we're working on in that. Lots of stuff going on. Wait, I was naming what was on that prize pack. Gosh, I need to keep track of things. There's so much going on. Like I said, it's got the hat, it's got the books, it's got the stickers. I have an autograph from Jane SG66. She sent it out to me to send to you guys because, bitch, she's adorable. We have Dragon Kovac that is donating that awesome dragon piece, which you're going to be able to hang on your wall and hang trinkets on. It's a completely resin crafted piece, so it's going to be beautiful for you to have in your home. And I believe Dragon's actually letting you pick the colors that you want. So they're going to custom make it for you when you win, which I believe Dragon's actually in the running, so Dragon might get to make it for themselves. But we're going to find out at the end of this episode who it actually is. We also have a copy, I've got it in my hand, of Damage, Midgar's new CD. You guys are going to get it before it officially drops on June 15th. The CD is great. You guys have already heard one of the songs from the album, Bring the Night, and this was playing before the episode started. If you didn't know, that was the intro from Bring the Night. So definitely want to stick around to the end of the episode for that. All kinds of stuff going on. It's going to be so exciting. I'm super glad you guys are here. Before we get into the stories and everything, I want to just talk about the ride that it's been these past 50 episodes, you know. I didn't originally start podcasting. I started doing stories on TikTok. And that was while I was writing my first book, Through the Flames. Through the Flames, the Arsonist. I was posting on TikTok. My kids were on TikTok, so I got on there, and I just started liking it. I started having fun with it. And then the first Halloween that I was on there, I posted scary stories because I love telling scary stories. And I never thought it was going to go anywhere. It was just something fun to do. I was having fun with it. And I kept building a following on TikTok. But I'm always telling stories. You can ask anybody I work with. And when I started trying to write my stories down and write them out, I started a web page, a WordPress page. And I had a friend, and you met that friend. And they decided that they were going to support when I started transferring those stories that I was writing on WordPress to audio. And that was technically my first foray into podcasting, is I'd hit a button and it would kind of read out what I'd written as a podcast. And they were my first follower. They were the first ones that were there, and they were always encouraging me to go on with it. Then came Atomicon in 2022. And I had so much fun there, and I was working on the podcast, and I started deciding that it was okay to get my voice out there again. I had lost a lot of confidence in myself. So I started putting my voice out there again after Atomicon, and so the podcast became more of my voice. And I still didn't know what I was going to do with it until one day a co-worker of mine who's also in for the drawing, Nikki, looked at me and said, why don't you just tell stories like you always do? And it clicked. That's what I would do, is I would be a storyteller. That would be my podcast, is I would tell people stories. Because I used to always look at people, we'd be talking about something, and I'd say, hey, let me tell you a story. That was my catchphrase. Let me tell you a story real quick. I got something for you. So that was how it all started. And then after that, Nikki was kind of my first follower and fan on that part. And of course, Dragon stuck with me. And I really didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And then I had one of those, you can support the show. And a buddy of mine named Adrian heard the first episode. And he immediately, he supported it, and he sent me a message, and he said, you're really good at this. And I'm putting down money for you to keep doing this, and I will keep supporting you so that you keep doing this. And at that point, I just had to keep going, and I've had to keep going. So for those of you who aren't happy that I'm hitting 50 episodes, for those of you who don't like that this is the 50th episode of the Carolina Storyteller, or the fact that we're going to keep going to episode 100, 200, 300, those are the three people you have to blame. If it wasn't for Dragon, Nikki, and Adrian, I probably would have quit already, but they believed in me and they backed me. And so I had to do it because they had faith in me. And then my family had faith in me and they started backing me. So then I couldn't stop. I had too many people that depended on me to get out here and to produce this content and to do it every day. So remember, you can blame my kids and family because they've always been my supporters. But also don't forget to blame Nikki, Adrian, and Dragon. And if you're a fan of the show, don't forget to thank them. Because without those three, without Crystal, and without my kids, I probably wouldn't have let it get this far. Anyway, we've got a great show. Sorry for the long intro. Stay tuned because there's more to come.
Congratulations on 50 episodes. I'm glad I could be a part of it. As you know, Applesauce has become sentient just for the opportunity to work with you. So thank you again, and I hope you have many more episodes to come. Wow.
I'm really, really happy for the support that I'm getting from my former guests and from my friends and from my family for the podcast getting this far. And that's why I'm doing so much to make this show extra special. We talked about the USS Alligator. That was awesome, but I want to get into something that I think is a little bit more interesting. And it ties back to one of my old stories, the graveyard. For those of you that don't know, there's a story, I think it's episode 4, about a graveyard that was very spooky to me in particular, where I had an experience. It might be episode 2, actually. Either way, I had an experience in this graveyard, and I never quite got over it. But I've never really told the story of that graveyard. So, well, let me tell you the story. To quote Golden Girls, picture this. 1940s, Georgetown, South Carolina. The motion pictures are starting to be shown at the Strand Theater on Front Street in South Carolina. Front Street is the big street downtown where they have all the little shops and all the people go for the Whoozy Watsits at night. On a particular summer's evening, a young doctor's wife attends a showing at the Strand Theater and then gets a bite to eat across the street at Thomas's Cafe. Wonderful little cafe that until recently was right across the street from Strand Theater. It's a great place. I used to go there and get breakfast. My grandmother was actually a cook there when I was a kid. Wonderful place to eat. But, she goes and gets something to eat, and then she proceeds to walk home. Her walk takes her down Screven Street to High Market, and then down High Market towards Orange Street. I believe she lived maybe on King. I'm not sure where her house was, but it was only a few blocks. It shouldn't have been much. It was the middle of town. There was homes all over the place, very nice, quiet area, the historic district of Georgetown. These homes were hundreds of years old. She had to pass by the old jail, which was at the time, I believe, being converted into a library. And then she passed by the Episcopal Church and the Episcopal Church graveyard, the Prince George graveyard, which has been there since, the mid 1700s, if not before. And as she passed by the first gate, something reached out and snatched her and pulled her into the graveyard. She screamed for help. A passerby heard the screams and ran to the nearest call phone that he could. And these things were actually still up in the historic district when I was a kid. They were little call boxes that you used to phone the police station. He ran to the call box and said that he heard a woman screaming from the graveyard and called for the police. The police immediately responded, which in 1940s terms might have been like 5-6 minutes. I don't know. They came in force, and when they entered the graveyard, they found a horror scene. The young nurse had been ripped in half across the top of a gravestone. Her lower half on one side, her upper half was cradled in the arms of the man who was supposed to be the groundskeeper there at the church. And the police, assuming that he did it, immediately opened fire. Now, understand that this groundskeeper was not your average guy. He was Lenny from Of Mice and Men. It was literally how the story was told to me, is that he was Lenny from Of Mice and Men. So he was big and strong, and a lot of people feared him because of that. He didn't know his own strength. But he was also kind and caring. And from what people said, he would not hurt a fly. And he was, of course, cradling this victim. But the police just assumed he was the murderer. So they opened fire and killed him right there on the spot. And the investigation would end up turning out that this poor man was not, in fact, the murderer. And he is said to be buried there on the very same ground that this graveyard is set on. I understand this graveyard takes up almost an entire city block. It's a huge space. It is said that after his death, his wrongful death, and the murder of this young girl, he has since walked these grounds trying to protect anyone who would be there, and more importantly, to drive off evil and cruel people. Now, if you've listened to the graveyard, you know my story. I walked around the graveyard by myself in the middle of the night, and after walking past the mausoleum, which is actually what I was told where this man was buried, though I've later been told that that's not the case, it's somebody else entirely, something appeared in the graveyard and came towards me, and I yelled and screamed at it. The leading theory is that this was me encountering this very same ghost of this man who was murdered. Well, not murdered. He was killed by police officers for being in the wrong place at the wrong time with the victim of a horrendous murder. And as far as I know to this date, the actual murderer was never caught. Just the man who was there at the wrong place at the wrong time. Very sad. I hate telling that story because it doesn't really have a happy ending, except for that it ties into one of my personal paranormal experiences. And I've always felt that there was something in that graveyard. It's always felt that way. And I've always believed that that story does ring true, that he still protects that graveyard to this day. And I don't really know what else to say other than that there's something there protecting the graveyard, and has been there for the past 100 years or so. But that is the story of the Prince George graveyard and the ghost that protects it even to this day. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope that it brings some conclusivity to those that have heard my graveyard tale. And if you haven't heard it, dial it back to episode 3, find out the whole story about everything that happened that night. And then you can carry on and listen to the rest of the show and, really fall in love with the storytelling. More show coming up. So stay tuned. We still have a big announcement and the giveaway coming up. So see you in a minute.
Hey Jonathan, it's Kissa, and I just wanted to wish you a happy 50th episode. Keep killing the scene like Lizzie Borden, no pun intended. Peace out.
That was awesome, right, guys? We're back, and to start us off with this week's story, it's the 50th episode. I had to figure out what story I was going to do, and I had so many options. We have some upcoming guests that I want to talk about real quick. Like I'm planning on getting with a composer that I met at Tomicon, who is really awesome, and they're doing a lot on Lavanya Fisher, and I want to get her on here because she's actually held Lavanya's skull. And so I definitely want to get her on here because she actually has facts about Lavanya that I never had. And then there was an author that I met who has just published her 4th book. She's a self-published author, but she has this wonderful series that Crystal is reading. I had to buy Crystal the entire series. They're all signed, and Crystal is loving them. And we're going to sit her down and we're going to talk to her about some of the local lore and history and ghost stories around here later on. So they almost ended up being this episode. I was almost like, yes, I'm going to bring them in, but I decided no. I also almost reached out to my good friends Tally Johnson and Victoria J, who were with me in Atomicon in 2022, to bring them on. There were so many options. But then I found this story. And so I want to take it back to the American Civil War. Not even the Civil War, actually. But that's what you're going to find if you look this up. You're going to go back to the American Civil War and hear about a submarine called the USS Alligator. But that was the 4th ship named the USS Alligator. So what was the USS Alligator, you ask? Well, the USS Alligator was originally commissioned in 1812 as a frigate by the U.S. Navy, and it was stationed in the harbor near Beaufort, South Carolina, as a blockade against the French and the English. It was there where the USS Alligator held off a raid on the port. See, they planned to go in and try and cut down the Alligator in the night. And the Alligator kept watch, and they saw the boats creeping in over the seas. So the Alligator opens fire and just starts taking out these boats that are attacking. And it ends up trying to make maneuvers and everything. It ends up getting ran aground. It had to be refloated, and it would later be sunk somewhere between Beaufort and Charleston during a battle during the War of 1812, which, as you know, was against England and Canada. So the second USS Alligator was commissioned. Now, this USS Alligator was a schooner, and it was actually sent down to the Caribbean to fight against pirates. That's right, it was an anti-pirate ship. Now, this one was actually sunk, again, close to the coast of South Carolina, after dealing with pirates and successfully running pirates off of the coast of Florida for several years. Now, the third iteration of the USS Alligator, I couldn't really find anything about, which kind of upset me. But it was the 4th iteration that really interests me, because it's where they kind of retired the name, and the curse of the USS Alligator kind of came into fruition. After all, it's been sunk 3 times. The third USS Alligator was a submarine. It was a Union submarine. As you remember, the Confederate submarine, the U.S. Hunley, was created here in Charleston and was sunk here in Charleston. Well, the Union created a submarine too. And they created this submarine to come down here and deal with the Hunley. And it was being towed by the USS Sumter from Cape Hatteras to Charleston when it came into stormy seas. And the crew of both ships, the USS Sumter and the USS Alligator, were lost. 36 men died. And now this ghost ship supposedly haunts the waters between. A ghost submarine of all things. A ghost submarine from the Civil War, and I've never heard of it before. The USS Alligator. And this thing was designed to have a crew of no more than like 4 or 5 people. Similar to the Hunley, it was meant to be used to attack the ships in the harbor. It wasn't meant for long-term voyages. Hence the reason why it was being towed. You know, it was powered by the crew inside. They couldn't put an engine in these things. So it was basically like bicycle powered. So it was being towed at the time to the harbor where it was supposed to defend and fight in the harbor. I don't think it was supposed to defend the harbor. I think they were trying to take the harbor. Either way, it was supposed to be how the Union was going to get Charleston. But when the Sumter hit that storm, whatever kind of storm that it was, and no one's really sure, it took down both the Sumter and the USS Alligator. They were both lost that day. And all crew members aboard perished. Everybody's gone. This was an amazing thing, and I'd never even heard of it. This was a South Carolina story that I'd never heard of, not once before, and I think it's kind of amazing because I remember when they brought the Hunley up all those years ago. They brought up the Hunley. It was a major issue. The Hunley was sunk in 1862, 1863, right in the Charleston Harbor. And this was supposed to be the answer to the Hunley. This was the Union's answer, and it never even made it here. And no one talks about it. No one wants to talk about the USS Alligator anymore. They don't want to talk about the USS Sumter. But it's interesting that both ships are named for locations. Well, both ships were named after a ship and a location in South Carolina, and they both sank together. And after that, they were done. So that's our first story for the evening. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found it really interesting and educational. It was something that I'd never heard before, and it just was like, whoa, that's really cool. I've got a little something else coming up. So stay tuned. There's more show to come. Hi, folks. This is just another extra segment to go on with the 50th episode. So, interesting thing, when I started this just over a year ago, somebody told me I should tell my stories online. And my stories weren't all paranormal or spooky. You know, sometimes they were stories about firefighting or stories about things that I'd done or places that I'd seen. And sometimes there were stories about things that I believed. And when I first did this, I recorded 4 stories. It was a paranormal story about a real ghost story. It was a firefighting story that I had experienced as a firefighter. There was, of course, the graveyard story that everybody loves. And then there was this little tidbit. And this little tidbit is something that I've kind of created off of my ideas and beliefs. Belief's a very interesting thing. You know, everybody should believe what they feel is right. And you can't force somebody to believe what you want. You can force them to act how you want. You can force them to live how you want by laws and everything. But you can't change a person's beliefs. That's something that's very personal. And it's also something that's very dangerous because beliefs can dictate how you act, and they're very hard to change. When I was very young, I say very young, I was a teenager, I heard some very wise words in a movie, and those words were that beliefs are very hard to change, but ideas can be molded and adjusted. So I don't have beliefs about religion, I have ideas. Now, I was raised in a Christian home. Originally, I was raised Southern Baptist, and then I was Presbyterian for a very long time. And And that didn't work out because I found hypocrisy in the church. So I went back to being Southern Baptist, where the hypocrisy was much less in this particular church. And I had some soul searching. I did some exploration. I did some looking around. I've read the Quran, the Torah. I've looked into Taoism and Buddhism, and I've studied Greek religions and Norse religions, and even Egyptian religions. I've studied all these things to try and learn what people believed and why they believed. I did find some core interesting facts that when you boil it all down, almost everybody has a teaching that is basically don't be a dick. This is the basic belief, it's, treat others kindly and with respect and show kindness, do good works. It is a general belief of how you should live your life, which is really interesting because there are a lot of us who live by these beliefs, and yet we are still not striving to reach these things. But I'm not here to talk about religion. I'm not even here to talk about my religion. What I am here to do is to tell you a story that I completely omitted from the first season of when it was Let Me Tell You a Story, the Carolina Storyteller podcast. I completely omitted it because I felt like it would offend too many people and it would push people away, and I was hiding a bit of myself. And so today, I'm going to tell you that story in a condensed version of scientific creationism. Now, before I get into all this, understand that I've also spent a lot of time studying science. I love science. Science is how we learn to interact with the world, and it's how we learn how the world works. And I think for someone who lives in the world, understanding these things is very important. And there is evidence of some kind of intelligent design, which goes to support the ideas of religion. So perhaps science and religion aren't so far apart as people think, but maybe they go more together, and it's the fact that people are so scared of it that we can't, have these discussions. So I'm just going to tell you a story. So my second preface to this story is a quote from a little-known show called Doctor Who. Now, this is the Peter Capaldi Doctor, or the 12th Doctor. And this comes from one of his later episodes. And it is the story of a bird. And the story is that there was a mountain made out of solid diamond. And once a year, a bird would come to this mountain and sharpen its beak on the mountain. And every year, for all time, this bird would come and sharpen its beak on this mountain. And when the bird had worn that mountain down to a pebble by sharpening its beak, the first second of eternity would have passed. Why do I talk about eternity? Well, if we're going to talk about religion, we're going to talk about cosmic beings. We're going to talk about beings that are all-powerful. And time, as we perceive it, is not a real thing. They live for eternity. They're eternal. The first second of eternity is just so massively long. Yet for some reason, we compare their time to our time. We perceive time based on the rotation of a spinning rock traveling thousands of miles an hour in space around a bright big ball of burning gas. And that is how we perceive time. But perhaps that is not how an all-powerful cosmic deity would perceive time. And perhaps that is where we make our mistake, as we assume that the grand design was done in our time, not in theirs. Neil deGrasse Tyson presents the time of the universe being billions and billions and billions of years old. This is something that we've been able to trace back and prove scientifically with fact. And not only that, but that this planet is hundreds of millions of years old. And comparatively, this planet is infinitesimal. Neil deGrasse Tyson states that if you were to condense the entire time of the universe and set it up as if it was a calendar year with 365 days, 24 hours in the days, 60 minutes in the hours, and 60 seconds in the minutes, all of human history would be compressed into the last minutes and last seconds of the last hour of the last day of that calendar year. In the grand scheme of things, a year has not even passed for the universe, while thousands of years have passed for us. And if you consider that for a minute, then for a cosmic being, the idea that we have only been here for seconds makes a whole lot of sense. And so does the idea that the creation story that is found in so many religions and myths, and even in the Christian Bible, that it lasts merely a week in most of these cases, is very feasible. Our sun was created billions of years ago. It was a ball of gas that condensed together. But in the cosmic scheme of things, it was just last week. It's probably Monday. We're on Saturday evening in the cosmic calendar. So our sun was created on Monday. And then on Tuesday, the dust and gases were combined together to create this ball of rock. You know, several balls of rock, but this was the third one away from this burning, fiery gas ball, and it was given an atmosphere. Next day, it had water on it, large amounts of water. And then the next day, life was created. Animals, creatures in the oceans, and then on the land, and then trees, and then plants. And, you know, a day after that, humans were created. And that's where we're at now. We're with humanity. And if you think about that, if you think about the progression of that we are now coming to that last dex, the last seconds of the last day of that last week, it does make a lot of sense. It makes a humongous amount of sense. That perhaps our perception of religious time, the time that a celestial being would be there, is what skewed everything and what's caused the big thing. Perhaps how creation really happened is how both science and religion perceive it. It's just two perceptions of the same event. And if that is the case, then perhaps we could all agree and come to terms and come to understandings. And understand, I'm not asking people to change their beliefs. I'm offering to ask and change ideas. I'm asking people to give it a thought, just to consider it. Maybe everybody's right. Maybe nobody's wrong. And if everybody's right and nobody's wrong, then maybe, just maybe, we can show a little understanding and be a little kinder to people. Now, you've heard enough of me.
Hey, Jonathan. Happy 50th episode. Love your favorite demon folklorist.
Ramble on about my own things. And you've heard a story, and you've heard me talk about, you know, how happy I am that this is the 50th episode of the podcast. But get ready for what you've really been waiting for, because now, my friends, we are going to go right in after this to the big drawing for the giveaway and the wrap-up of the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, I know we're right at the end of the podcast, but before we get to the drawing, there's one thing left I need to do. A Frigg Valmont. Maybe you've heard me mention him before, if you've been around me when I talk about him. What if I told you that I'm working on a special project? This project, set to come out December 1st, 2024, is a collaboration with a lot of very talented people, including Corey from the No Deep Thoughts podcast, Jacqueline Burns, known as the Vampire Witch Queen, and several others who are just getting involved and just getting ready to work on the audio drama for my own creation, Valmont. The story is set in a fictional city named Black Raven, which is basically an analog for the city of Charleston. But I named it Black Raven. Sue me. And in this city, an ancient vampire named Cain has come and decided that he wants to take control of the supernatural underworld that runs this city in order to find a source of immense power that will allow him to take control of the world. In order to do that, he's allied himself with some very dastardly people. And in order to stop them, the Shadow Council has sent in one of their agents, a Miss Kira Knightwood. And someone has to help her find her way through the city and stop this fiendish Cain before he does something ultimately evil and destructive. And who's that going to be? A Frigg Valmont, a former rich kid and Marine turned into mercenary and gun for hire. Private eye willing to get his hands dirty to get the job done, whatever the job may be. Lives in a morally gray area and sees the laws, guidelines, kind of like a pirate's code. Stay tuned because we're going to have more updates, anecdotes from the show, all kinds of stuff coming up soon. But Valmont will be coming to you wherever you listen to podcasts as an audio drama on December 1st, 2024. So stay tuned. Wake up, Mr. Valmont. Your ride is over.
Hey, Afrik, man.
About time you woke up.
Mr. Valmont?
Yeah. You guys closed for a private function?
You'd prefer a 300-year-old vampire wait on your doorstep.
Who are you? And where the fuck am I?
And I will always win.
The Fed started hiring people that can read?
Just leave this file with you and trust you've still got the undercover skills I remember so well. There are values in mortality that we can only dream of, Gabe.
In Valmont.
You gave me blood? What do you think I am? A vampire? Hey, why don't you ask Satan? You guys are family, right, Ms. Morningstar?
So this is it. This is what you've all been waiting for this entire episode. We are now going to roll the dice and decide who out of the Patreon members that we have is going to get to take home that lovely prize package with let me go over it real quick. You have a copy of Redcoats, a copy of Through the Flames, a Carolina Storyteller hat, stickers from the Truth or Demon podcast, stickers from the Carolina Storyteller. You've got a autograph from Jane SG66. You've got a copy of Damage, the new album that comes out on June 15th from Midgard. And then you're getting the customized dragon trinket holder from Dragon Kovacs Resin Walk. It's a great prize pack. Lots of nice, neat stuff. All of it coming from guests and friends of the show who have been so supportive. Some of them actually even in this drawing because they're Patreon supporters of the show. So with me today are two people without whom I wouldn't be able to do this show because their support has made me through it. So I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves real quick. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Crimson.
Hi, I'm Adam.
That's right, Crimson and Adam. My family, Wash couldn't be here to join us, but they're here in spirit. And we're going to roll the dice and pick. Let's list the finalists real quick. We have the Killing 15 Minutes podcast. We have Liz from Ouch, Was That a Ghost podcast. We have Stevie, who is the host of Truth or Demon podcast. We have Dragon Kovac, who keeps a tab on applesauce for us. We have Adrian Michael Nina, who has been a supporter since episode 1, and Natasha Klein, who is my friend Nikki. And let's face it, Nikki's the one that looked at me and said, you should tell stories. So everybody can blame Nikki for this whole thing in the first place. So I'm not going to roll the dice. I'm going to ask Adam or Crimson, which one of you wants to roll the D6 to make that decision?
I will.
All right. So Adam is going to roll the dice. Adam, are you ready to roll the dice? Four. lucky number 4. And if you know that, I just dimmed them out. The winner is going to be Dragon Kovac. Dragon, I'm still holding to that trinket holder, so I want the trinket holder for myself. You don't have to, but I'm just saying, it was being donated. But everybody, congratulate Dragon Kovac for winning. I'm going to be doing another drawing in October for the season finale of this year. So be ready for that. But congratulations to all 6 of you for qualifying. You're all going to get some stickers and some goodies. But Dragon Kovac, you are getting the full enchilada, the entire podcast. So everybody, let's cheer for Dragon. Say hooray.
Hooray! Yay, Dragon!
All right, guys, that was the 50th episode giveaway. That was the entire 50th episode. Thanks for sitting through it with me and dealing with all of that. We'll see you next time, and we'll see you at the 100th episode, and then the 200th episode, and then the 300th episode. And then at some point, you guys are going to get tired of me, but it doesn't matter. I'm still going to keep making episodes because I just can't seem to shut up. So we'll see you next time, and stay spooky, my friends.